Hello and welcome to Culture Reframed. Hi, and welcome to Culture Reframe's Facebook Live. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure there's many places, well, not that many you could be, but we really appreciate you being here. So we've been doing these regular Facebook Lives, and you can go to our Facebook page, Culture Reframed, and you'll be able to see a lot of them recorded and look on. So today, and I'm going to share my screen before I start. So today I'm going to be talking about bringing up girls in a patriarchal culture. And what I'm going to be looking at is, what does it mean today to grow up in a culture that is saturated with pornography and pornographic images? What does it mean to our young girls? And what does it mean to us as women and as feminists? What responsibility do we have to build a feminist movement that provides them with resilience and resistance to this pornographic culture? So I want to begin by talking about the fact that very few parents and educators really get what's going on. When I lecture to those groups, they're often shocked by the images that I show. And they really shouldn't be, because we really need to adult up here and help our teens and our daughters especially navigate this new world. Who really knows what's going on is the media. And this is Details magazine. Now, Details is kind of cosmopolitan for men. And they have an article called How Internet Porn is Changing Teen Sex. So let's see what they say. They interviewed Joanna Angel, who describes herself, by the way, as a feminist pornographer, which I will be arguing soon. There is no such thing as a feminist pornographer. You're either a feminist or you're a pornographer. You have to decide which. So, but she did say something really interesting. She said the girls these days, they just seem to come to the set porn ready. So we're going to discuss what this means and how our girls are being socialized. And I'm sure you're going to have questions, and I hope you put your questions in the chat, and also let us know where you're from so we can get a sense of people who are watching. So this is where we're really going to start, is what does it mean to come to the set porn ready? Well, what's important is to understand that our girls today are socialized through images. And images speak in a language very different to print. As Neil Postman, the great media theorist, once said, we developed some immunization to the seduction of eloquence of the printed word. To which I would add, we have not developed any immunization to the seduction of eloquence of the image, because images often bypass the frontal lobes of the brain, the executive part, and they lodge themselves in specific ways. I'm going to do an example of that in a minute. So when we go through the images that surround our young girls and they're thinking about themselves as who they are as females, what we see is there's really only one media image up there. And by the way, I should warn people, if you've got kids around, you probably don't want them to be listening to this. So again, images, and what you see is young, white, blonde females. It's a culture of whiteness where often women of color are relegated. And examples like this, where we see these technologically enhanced images, by the way, her stomach's in the wrong place, but who cares? She looks good. And then when you see this image like this, and I want to say, how many women actually do this to themselves, and girls do this to themselves in the morning after a shower, you know, or they look in the mirror and they cut themselves up into bits and pieces. And by the way, nothing is good enough. That is the key thing here. Everything needs work. The body as it is needs work, and to do that work you need to spend money. And I want to argue that so much of global capitalism is actually built on the labor of women in developing countries producing products for the more privileged women, often in the Western world. And I want us to think what would happen tomorrow if women all over the world woke up and looked at themselves and said, you know what, I really like myself, I feel really good. We would have a complete collapse. Well, we've got that anyway, but a worse collapse of global capitalism. So I want us to think about the degree to which body loathing for women is built into the economic system. Now, when we do have women of colour, they're few and far between, and they look like often Beyonce or Cardi B. And I want to you to notice here the degree to which women of colour are shown in animalistic ways, as in Rihanna. And this is a throwback and a trope from slavery, which was a way to argue that women of colour, especially African Americans, had this kind of animalistic sexuality. So, of course, you couldn't blame the poor white slave owners or white workers for raping these women, because it was their fault. It was a real way to put the blame on the women of colour and to take it off the white men who were doing the abuse. So I want us to think about how the visual grammar works here. And first of all, to just do a little experiment, just look at this woman. Now, she's not real, right? There's nothing about her that's real. Everything is airbrushed, technologically enhanced. However, what I want to add here, really importantly, is that as much as I say this isn't real, how many of you out there are still comparing yourselves to her and think you look like a fat pig and you need to go on a diet? How many of you feel that way? Well, this is the power of the image. No matter what you hear, it impacts you in a way that verbal and a text cannot do. So when we think about this and think about this idea of how we compare ourselves to her, I want us to also to think about the visual grammar and who she's speaking to. And it's clear she's not talking to her mother, saying, let's go for a cup of coffee after the photo shoot. She's speaking to men. And this is what we call the male gaze, where she becomes sexually vulnerable, offering out to men, come get me. Now, what's interesting about this is in my classes, I used to get the students to come, women students to do this gaze. And then I'd ask some of the male students, and they really couldn't do it. They couldn't do this come get me gaze. And when we had to shout instructions to the male students of how to do it, they actually looked pretty ridiculous. So the question is, why is this the normal image for women and not for men? And the answer here lies in the crux of how we have organized the sex class system. What makes women hot is sexual vulnerability. What makes guys hot is not sexual vulnerability, it's sexual aggression. And so actually built into this system is when you throw in alcohol, you throw in porn culture, and what you've got here is you're setting the landscape for rape. And often what we say is that men who rape, and this is really hard to say because it's very upsetting, men who rape are not actually deviants. What they are overconformists to the societal norms and values that they see on a regular basis. And actually, as a sociologist, my interest is more in why don't all men rape? Because every message they get coming at them, whether it be from magazines, whether it be from pornography, is that women are sexually disposable, exist for men's usage, to be gotten rid of when they're finished. So what we want to know is, what are the resilient and resistant factors in those men who are not sexually abusive? That would actually make a much more important study for us to find out how we're going to stop this incredible pandemic of sexual violence. Now, I want to talk about how girls are groomed in our culture. And for this, we have to go to Teen Vogue, which is one of the most popular websites for teens. The ages vary between something like 13 to 16. And Teen Vogue, which basically sells itself as this kind of progressive, woke magazine, actually is incredibly sexist. For example, one thing it had was a whole guide to anal sex. You were asking 14-year-old girls, 15-year-old girls who are not yet sexually mature to try and negotiate this with men who've learned it, with boys and men who've learned this through pornography. And what they say in this is very interesting. This is the text accompanying the article. When you do have anal sex, go slowly. Regular communication with your partner is essential. If something hurts, say so and stop. Take a breather. Be sure to relax as much as possible. If you tense up, it will make things much more difficult and therefore less fun. So let me ask what fun you're having when it hurts. You have to take a breather and relax in order to get through this. What they should say is stop, and period after that. And really, this is something that you need to talk about and communicate with your partner when we know that both boys and girls, young men and young women, are brought up in a porn culture which is all about non-communication. Hook-up sex is based on the fact that you're not going to communicate how far you're going to go, because his wants to go back to his friends the next day and said, well, we did this and this. Usually I can't use the language that I would normally use because I don't know who's listening. But she wants to go back to her friends and take it down a few levels about what she did with him. So what you see is communication in hookup sex, which has replaced dating or any long-term relationships on the college campuses, is not going to work. It's not going to work. And what you are doing is you are setting our girls up to acquiesce and consent, and I use consent here very, very loosely, to a type of sex that, by the way, has become extremely popular in pornography. I would say that almost anal sex has replaced vaginal sex in porn. Now, Teen Vogue on porn, this is interesting. In terms of incorporating consent, making it more ubiquitous in porn could help promote the cultural shift we need. So what they're saying basically is that the pornographers, these group of creepy guys in Los Angeles, Montreal, and Luxembourg, that's the group in MindGeek. Everyone should know MindGeek, the Amazon of porn. They're the ones who are going to teach young girls and women about consent. This is exactly what we need. We need a group of basically predatory capitalists to teach our young girls what consent looks like. What we actually need is really good, robust, feminist sex education that explains what consent is, coming at this from understanding that our girls are groomed to consent from the word go in this culture. Now, this is Teen Vogue on sexting. And a reader asked the question, I want to send my partner nudes, but I'm nervous that I might get into the wrong hands. Good question. But she says, I like the idea of sharing sexy pics. What should I do? Well, the answer is don't. Okay? Do not do this. But of course, what does Teen Vogue say? Answer. Get very familiar with yourself. Pose in the mirror. Caress your silhouette. Know your naked angles. Share them in the spirit of mutual trust and arousal. Finally ready to send the selfie? If you've done due diligence, the feelings are mutual, you feel comfortable with the person and trust them to guard your nudes with their life, press send on your favorite pic. Okay, so let's think about this. First of all, the first answer should be, if you do this, you are breaking the law in most states. You could be arrested as a girl under 18 for sending child pornography, and you can be put on the sex offender list. So first of all, Teen Vogue is promoting something that is illegal. Secondly, what we know is that a good majority, from 60 to 80%, depending on what studies you're looking at, of girls are often bullied and sexually harassed into sexting. We also know the role that sexting plays in sextortion, revenge porn, and if you trust them to guard your nudes with your life, what are they talking about? We know what goes on out there. And then what happens is, of course, this guy you're trusting to guard the nudes with your life will very likely share them with the school and the whole community, and her life is over. We know it increases the chance of suicide, of cutting, of depression, of anxiety. This is how they're grooming our girls, basically for destruction. This is what will happen when those nudes get sent out to everybody. And you're asking, again, 14-year-old, 15-year-old girls to make a decision that they are not yet developmentally able to make, because the preteen and teen brain doesn't have a fully developed prefrontal cortex. So this is so irresponsible on so many levels, and it is really a big setup for our girls. Now, the selfies, is no surprise that 74% of Snapchat photos are selfies, 1,000 selfies posted on Instagram every second, 19 out of 20 teens have taken a selfie, 93 million selfies taken each day. I want to ask everyone out there a question. Do you remember when we used to take pictures of other people? How crazy is this? Looking into the camera and figuring out your best angle. We are creating a generation of kind of narcissistic voyeurs about cutting your own body to shreds, because, by the way, there is never a good enough selfie. This is what my students used to tell me. You can always improve on a selfie. There is a level of obsession with the body that is really unhealthy. And of course, we know, for example, Kylie Jenner, who is the most famous example of selfies, is absolutely considered today one of the most famous women in the world. If you go on to Snapchat and Instagram, these are the kind of selfies you see, which these are just young women basically mimicking the porn that they've seen. Now, what we know from a report from the American Psychological Association on hypersexualized culture, that the more girls are socialized into this pornified culture, the more they learn to self-objectify, which leads to anxiety, depression, body loathing, risky sexual behavior, suicidal ideation, STDs, self-harming, etc. In fact, very similar responses to rape victims. So in a way, you're being asked to have an inauthentic sense of self. You are being stripped of your own identity and instead being fed a false identity by this culture. This is what is going on today. And in fact, this is now 10 years old. Oh, I think 13 years old, the APA report, the American Psychological Association report. We commissioned one of the lead writers, Dr. Sharon Lamb, to update it. And you can go on the Culture Reframed website and you can see an updated version of this report. Now, in another study, they found that Instagram was deemed the worst app for mental health and well-being, again, leading to increased anxiety, depression, bullying, reduced self-esteem, and FOMO, fear of missing out. This means that kids, or especially girls, are glued to their phone because they're worried that maybe there's a whole discussion about them, they're being bullied and they don't know. There is no downtime. There is no going home and just relaxing away from the mean girl syndrome or from being bullied by boys. You are on all the time. No wonder we're seeing increased anxiety and depression. And what this is really leads to, and this, by the way, well, who taught me the most about this was not a PhD in media studies, but was actually an incarcerated child rapist who had not had any interest in children, got into regular porn, became addicted, went to teen porn, then went into child porn sharing, and then raped his stepdaughter, 10 years old. And he said to me, he was trying to show me how smart he was. He was using all the lingo. And he said, the culture did a lot of the grooming for me. And I have to tell you that when he said this was in a prison, I almost fell off my chair. Because I thought, oh my God, this is completely right. We are living in a culture that perpetrates against our young girls. This is what is happening. Instead of having an individual perpetrator going after an individual girl, which we still have, but we have a more economical way now of mass grooming. We have a mass culture grooming en masse our girls to be, as Joanna Angel said, porn ready. Now, porn also grooms boys and men to want images of young-looking girls. And I want to give you some examples here. So if you go on Pornhub, which I absolutely do not recommend, but I've done the research, so there's no reason for you to go on. There's categories that come up on the left, and there's over 100 of them. And there's terms like the big ones are amateur porn, teens, and then rough sex. And I'm not going to go into all the others because, again, I don't know who are listening. So if you look at the numbers, these are the numbers of actual videos that are on each of the categories. Now, this is deceiving because actually there are a thing called tags. So you can go into Pornhub and you can look to see what men who put teens in are also putting in, because these are what the tags are to teen. So I went in and I looked at teens and got the tags. And the tags, that is, they put in teens, but they also put in this. Small tits, solo female, virgin pussy defloration, virgin, first time. These are just some of the tags I came up with. So when you add up teens as well as these other terms that they're going in to look at, we're actually at over 500,000 videos. And this was just the start of like an hour's research. So in fact, teen porn dominates every category by at least twice or three times. So what we're doing is we are socializing men and boys into wanting young-looking girls. And now we have research that shows, clinical evidence and research are now accumulating to suggest that the internet is not simply drawing attention to those with existing pedophilic interests, but, and this is important, contributing to the crystallization of those interests in people with no explicit sexual interest in children. Well, first of all, get rid of people and let's put men, because it's vast majority men. And what does this mean? It means now that it's not only are girls at risk of being abused by pedophiles, they're now at risk of being abused by men who are not pedophiles, but are developing a sexual interest in children because of their porn use. Do you get just how much danger we are putting our girls in? Now, as we are putting our girls in increasing danger, mainstream feminism is increasingly undermining the well-being of our girls with this faux feminism. Now, let's go back to what it used to be. This is Barbara Smith from This Bridge Called My Back, which was a crucial book in the second wave. Feminism is the political theory and practice to free all women. Anything less than that is not feminism. Notice they say to free all women. They don't say empower. They're talking about freeing them from the material inequalities of being a sex class. This is very different. We never saw the word empowerment during the 60s, 70s, and 80s of the second wave. The core concept of feminism, radical feminism especially, was that women exist as a sex class. And as Andrea Dworkin put it so well, the fate of every individual woman, no matter her politics, character, values, qualities, is tied to the fate of all women, whether she likes it or not. That means we are talking here about women's liberation. Look, I am so empowered. I am a white, upper-class, educated woman. I've got so much empowerment, I don't know what to do with it. That means absolutely nothing for those women of colour, for poverty-stricken women, for women all over the global south. My empowerment doesn't help them. In fact, my empowerment is built on their backs. So I, as a radical feminist, don't want to talk about empowerment. I want to talk about liberation and sisterhood and get back to the idea that feminism is about freeing all women, not simply a small group of elite women. Now, this is where the rot started to settle in. Jennifer Bogardner wrote in Alternate, feminism is something individual to each feminist. No, I'm sorry, it's not. What other movement is individual to each person? This is Alternate, a progressive magazine. If I was to write an article tomorrow to say the labour movement is something individual to every worker, do you think they'd publish that? That would be ludicrous. Or Black Lives Matter is something individual to every Black person. No, movements have ideologies, they have collective interests, they work together, they have goals, social change. It's not an individualistic thing that you just pick like you're in a buffet deciding which little pieces you want. Now, mainstream feminism celebrates an individualistic view where I'm so sick, and I'm sure a lot of you listening are, of hearing the words free choice, agency, and empowerment. My question here is, what does free speech, agency, and empowerment mean when girls are socialized in a porn culture to see themselves as sex objects? What does any of this mean when your free choice, when your sense of self, your agency has been smacked down from the moment you understand that you belong to this class called female, and that your job is to look as hot as possible in order to entice the guys? Now, what we also know is in this third wave faux feminism, there are words that basically obfuscate the reality of sexual oppression. If I could eradicate certain words from the lingo, they would go probably in this order. First, sex work. Sex work is a term basically used by the sex industry, introduced by the sex industry, promoted by the sex industry in order to eradicate and render invisible the violence done to women who are prostituted. It is not sex work, it is sexual slavery. There is no such thing as feminist porn. As I said before, you are either a feminist or a pornographer, because the first rule of feminism is do no harm to women. There is no such thing as ethical porn. This is trying to get onto the whole notion of ethical consumption. It doesn't exist. And slut walk. What is a slut walk? Right? What is slut shaming? And if you call a woman a slut and you're accused of slut shaming, what does it mean to shame a concept that's already shamed? Slut is a term to shame her. You can't double shame. If you call a woman a slut, you're not slut shaming her, you're being a misogynist. Simple as that. So there is no such thing as a slut in our culture. It is invented by men and patriarchy as a way to basically please women's sexuality. And we're back there to the girls just seem to come to the set porn ready. If you are going to have these words that obfuscate the reality of women and girls' lives, then they are going to be porn ready, because the porn culture is making them ready, and these terms are. Our girls deserve a feminist movement that gives them the language, concepts, and sense of self that builds resilience and resistance to porn culture. That is a movement that does not collaborate, does not concede to, and does not work alongside the patriarchy. It is a movement of resistance that says we are not handing over our girls to you. We refuse. And one of the things that we have done at Culture Reframed is we have built a parents program to help parents talk to their kids about pornography, sexting, about all of these issues. Because we say if you don't talk to your kids about porn culture, the porn culture will. And this is true for both boys and girls. And we have provided the resources for you with a free online program with 12 modules for parents of teens, 11 modules for parents of teens, takes you through the social, emotional, behavioral, cognitive developments, talks about the way that porn culture harms and undermines these developments, and then gives you tools and skills to have multiple conversations. And we even script out conversations at the end to have around porn culture, sexting, consent. We have given you a one-shot. So it's a best practice toolkit to build knowledge in parents so that they can build porn resilient kids. This is Culture Reframed. This is what we do. Go to our parents program. And if I haven't answered any or all of your questions, which I hope I haven't in this short time, please feel free to email us at info@culturereframed.org. And I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to take questions. So, questions, comments. Oh, there's lots. Okay, so I'm just going to have a look. How do we change all this? It seems hopeless. No, it's not hopeless. If we say it's hopeless, we do the work of the patriarchy. We give up before we even start. It is not hopeless. We build a movement of women and good men of good faith who are willing to be uncompromising. Keep speaking despite the backlash. Absolutely. The only thing we have is our voice. Well, we now have the internet as well, but do not be silenced. How I wish I had more of these resources when raising my daughter. Yeah, I agree with you, Melanie, but you know what? Now it's out there for women who are raising their daughters. So let me go back up. So we've got people from Utah, from British Columbia, from Canada. Some of the names I recognize from my Facebook. Someone from Manchester in England, where I was born and raised. Birmingham, England. Wow. Tiffany Reed. Yes, she mentioned my book, Pornland. A lot of this is in Pornland. Also, you can watch my TED Talk as well. Here's someone from the secular Jewish Shalom community. Someone after my own heart. I myself am a secular Jew. Cool. Oh, I'm not anyone's hero. No, I'm just doing the work that has to get done. Somebody's saying she'd love to arrange a webinar for high school educators in England in September. Are you interested? Yes, absolutely. People saying thank you. So some more questions. Somebody saying terrifying. Yes, it is actually terrifying. To be perfectly honest with you, it is. But you know what? That should be the fuel for our cause. We cannot allow ourselves to be intimidated. It is our job as adult women to stand up for our daughters. And you know what? Also, by doing that, we're standing up for our sons. Because I do not believe that men and boys are born rapists, batterers, or porn users. I know that as a sociologist. I know it as a feminist, and you know that, more importantly, I know it as the mother of a son. No one can tell me that my beautiful boy was born a rapist or a sexist or a batterer or a porn user. But you know what? Me and my partner, David, we were in a battle, us against the culture for the soul of my boy, because God, did they want him? But you know what? They didn't get him. That was one boy they didn't get. And I hope you've got sons that the patriarchy didn't get. So I don't want to say, please do not think this is hopeless. Now that parents are homeschooling, this is from Karen. Hi, Karen. Now that parents are homeschooling, would you consider doing private meetings with parents and children? Some of these are so embarrassed to have the discussions. You know what? I'd love to say yes, but it's very hard to do private meetings because my time is so taken up. I will do collective meetings if groups of parents want to get together and bring a whole group and we can do a Zoom. I would be delighted to do that. I just can't do it individually given, sorry, my schedule. And we're standing up for our inner children, yes, because you know what? Is there any woman on this at this moment who doesn't feel some of this and how we were socialized? Do you have presentations for schools? Yes, we do have presentations for schools. I have given many presentations in schools all over the world, and also our executive director, Sam Wexler, also gives presentations. We do it together, we do it separately. Someone's saying I never really have education modules. This is so important. Yes. If you go on our Culturally Framed free program, and we made that program free very purposely because we said that everybody should be able to afford this. So you can go on, you can download it, and a lot of schools are actually using our program because it's so scientifically robust and built by experts from multidisciplinary experts and multicultural experts in psychology, developmental psychology, sex education, neuroscience. It's built by so many. It looks seamless, you wouldn't know, but it's being downloaded and used in schools as part of sex ed, part of the human development curriculum. And I want to say something about sex ed. First of all, of course, there's not enough of it. Secondly, you cannot teach sex education if you do not have a critical porn literacy lens at the core of it. You cannot teach kids about what sex is meant to be in relationships when they come into the classroom already with their sexual template formed by pornography. I have not seen, and if anybody knows, please put it in the chat, of a good sex education curriculum that deals with pornography. Because we haven't found one, we at Culturally Framed are building a sex ed curriculum which follows best practices, which is porn-centered. Good to remind parents if their preteen teen is suddenly acting off, especially a boy, to be sure to question. That's absolutely right. If you're suddenly seeing a change in behavior, think about possible excessive use of porn, if not addiction. How do we tackle liberal intersectional feminism? Actually, we don't. We take the radical view of it. Intersectionality is really important, but it's not that watered down intersectional identity politics that we take on. Intersectional politics that we take on is how the intersections of economics, of class, of race come together to locate certain women as more materially abused and oppressed than others. We have to be a movement that speaks to the most oppressed. We do not want to be a movement that speaks only to those who are the most privileged. And unfortunately, a lot of mainstream feminism has become with that. Yes, collective presentations, that's great. I certainly will do collective presentations, Karen. What do you think of Erica Lust and her, Erica Lust? I asked that question. Erica Lust is a shill for the porn industry. She had a show on Netflix where she was going to do feminist porn. What this feminist porn consisted of was unbelievable. It was a show called, it'll come to me in a minute. Anyway, it was a show and one of it featured Erica Lust. So this was her feminist pornography. She was really feminist and she brought in this woman who'd never done porn before. And she paired her with a guy from porn. And the idea was that this woman's fantasy was to have sex while playing the piano. Okay. What happened is that this guy from porn, this porn performer, completely traumatized this woman. You saw her looking like she didn't know what was happening to her. And in the middle, they had to stop. But this was feminist porn, okay? So Erica Lust, being really a kind feminist, she gave her a little bit of hug and she gave her a bottle of water. Because in non-feminist porn, they probably slap her across the face and say, carry on, bitch. But this is feminist. So she gave her some water and gave her a hug. And then she said to her, you know what? Carry on. And if you can't have an orgasm, just fake it. So this was meant to be an authentic feminist porn of authentic feminist sexuality where the woman is completely destroyed and then told to fake an orgasm at the end. All of these feminist, so-called feminist pornographers are just shills for the porn industry. There is no such thing as feminist porn because porn is sexual exploitation. Thank you, Jocelyn. I absolutely agree with you. Let me see some other stuff. If I missed some. Feminist porn is an oxymoron, like saying dry water. Absolutely. Anyone more? Is there any research about women who have lost their breasts and how men respond to this? In my experience, having a double mastectomy, men generally find this repulsive. I don't know of any research, but you know, that makes a lot of sense given the way that women's bodies are pornified. I mean, men often, I mean, I'm really sorry that happened to you, and I hope you're healthy and you're okay. But you know what men also find repulsive? Not just things like that, they also find pubic hair repulsive. I had female students in my class who told me that their boyfriends will not have sex with them unless they are fully waxed. Can you imagine that? Turning down sex because she's not fully waxed. And of course, that comes from the porn industry. My question is, how can we stop people having access to porn if people, well, they don't often download it, actually. They go on the free porn sites. And the way we stop this is, you know what? We regulate this industry out of existence. Porn is the only multi-billion-dollar industry that is not regulated in any way. We need to start regulating this, and we need to start having politicians with the political will to do this. Any other questions? I became aware of your work decades ago as my young daughter's under adolescence. You helped me in my parenting efforts. Thank you. I'm really glad I could do that. That's one of my life's goals. Any other questions I've missed here? Please feel free to add more questions. Gail, I have a question. Jay, what's your question? I have a question with an answer. Please, I'm sorry, Jay, I can't find it. Can you post it again at the bottom? I'm just looking for it, and it's gotten lost in there's many questions. Jay, how can people watching? Oh, I've just answered it. Yeah, that's how you stop. It's not downloaded, a lot of it. As I said, it's actually free. I don't know if you want to come back with a comment, George. Would it make it a black market? You know what? If we regulated the porn industry out of existence, it would push it underground, which is exactly where it should be. Because the more underground an industry is, the less power it has to interface with mainstream capitalist organizations like venture capitalists, banks, Visa, MasterCard, all those things. So actually, well, it wouldn't create a black market as much as push it underground, which would be a sort of black market, but that's exactly what it should be. It should not be up above ground interfacing with all major corporations. This presentation is resonating so much, but you're saying there's not a place for porn. I'm absolutely saying there's not a place for porn. There's a place for erotica. There's a place for us to have wonderful relationships, whether they're same-sex or heterosexual. Lesbian porn, now most of lesbian porn that's on the sites is actually consumed by men. And also the question is, why should a group of women be selected out of this culture in order to sexually arouse another or everybody else? Why should their vulnerabilities, their bodies be on display? And let's be very clear, these are not women who have options. They're not women who've got law degrees or medical degrees. These are women who are often doing this to put food on the table. They do not exist for the sexual gratification of you, me, or anyone else out there. So no, I do not think we have a right to exploit any women under those conditions whatsoever. And you know what? If there was no money involved in porn, you tell me how many women would put their hand up and say, I'll volunteer, I'll be in porn, I'll let my body be shown everywhere, I will lose complete control of my image, I will never have my image back again. No, don't worry, I'll do it for nothing. You know what? The porn industry would collapse if money wasn't there. Do you believe that transgenderism promotes a patriarchal view? I do believe that we need to think about all of us getting out of this gender box that we have been constrained in, and that what we all need to do is get over gender, because gender is the ideology that legitimizes patriarchy and women as a sex class. Well, it's all pornography. Yeah, pornographers are traffickers. Yes, this is true. This is a question that pornographers often are traffickers. The reason being that many of the pornographers, well, women in pornography have so-called agents, which are really pimps. Okay, so it's a third party involved. So yes. How do we abolish prostitution? Well, we have examples in countries. The Nordic model is the best model out there. It's now called the equality model, where we decriminalize the women and we criminalize the Johns and the pimps. Well, I think that's about it. If anyone's got any more questions, I can stay on an extra few minutes. I'm just waiting to see. Money from porn goes directly to the government. How will porn industry ever get regulated? You know what? We force it. We're not going to wait for the politicians. We, as a group, feminists, are going to rise up, and we are going to insist that not only they protect us as women, they protect our children as well. When should you start talking to girls about porn? Well, you should start talking to all kids about porn from a very early age. Now, you want to make it age appropriate. We started with our son talking about boundaries and body borders from a very early age. And I always want to say what happened is, in the end, my son's first language was feminism. He spoke feminism before, he sees things before I did. And just to give some of a nice story to show that it does work, we were out one Christmas time walking past a shop, and he was about 5 years old. And I had walked past this shop and missed it. And he stops me, he goes, Mom, he said, uh-oh, and he points to something. I said, what's the matter? He said, look, they're hanging that model from the Christmas lights. They're hanging her. That's sexist. He's 5 years old. And I had missed it. I said, you're right. What are we going to do? He said, we've got to go in and protest, of course. So, of course, I want to go home and cook, but no, I've got to go in and protest because I've taught him to protest. So in we go, and I say, you're hanging that woman, it looks like a woman, from the Christmas lights. You do realise that you're promoting some form of violence against women here. And she starts arguing with me. I said, look, I'm not here to argue with you. I just want you to know that you have 24 hours to take that down, or you're going on a national boycott line. And the last time we put a company on the national boycott line, it went bankrupt. I went back the next day, it was gone. You know what? There is no national boycott line. Nothing, but it worked. So this is what you do. You use some, I mean, I know some people don't like to lie, and I certainly respect that. I will use whatever is at my fingertips in order to do activism. So I am being told by our organizer that I have to stop. Feel free to continue the discussion. If you've got any questions, please join in and write to info@Culture Reframed. We are a non-profit, so feel free to donate. And this work is work that we do because we believe that our daughters and our sons are worth way more than the porn industry and porn culture. We love our kids. We are not handing them over to a bunch of predators in order to define who they are. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, and I hope to be hearing from some of you soon. Bye-bye.